is that whenever there is a major national crisis, they really, by and large, stand up to support government and the whole society in moving forward. I can talk specifically about the organization that I am chairman of. Graphic, for instance, did some very good job in terms of giving information that is reliable and also raising issues that I think would help government and key agencies to be alert and help with their policies and programs. However, there is one area that in all of this conversation we have tended to gloss over or not even be conscious of. We are all aware that during the pandemic, a lot of fake news, a lot of false information, a lot of misleading material were being peddled left and right on social media, in some mainstream media, and so on. But I think the biggest weakness of the media has been in the area of helping to overcome superstition, not only in relation to the pandemic, but in general terms, in relation to everything. We are talking about the recovery of this continent from all these doldrums into, a brighter future. But we do very well in looking at the larger picture, the bigger picture, and so on. But some of the fundamental things that set us back, such as superstition, false beliefs, false consciousness, and so on, not only the media, but the larger society tend not to address these. Yeah. Last week, a young woman I know who lives in our neighborhood came to my house and told me that she works in an organization where there are 100 people, and the management of the organization was asking them to go and vaccinate. And yet, as she told me, most of the people in that organization, young people generally and so on, did not want to go. Why? Because the false information there is that if you are a woman and you vaccinate, you'll become infertile. You will not be able to have a child. I mean, this kind of superstitious belief is widespread. And how do the media tackle this? Remember when the pandemic broke out, one of the statements, one of the sentences in President Akufo-Addo's very first broadcast was that we must approach this from a scientific perspective. In other words, what I'm aiming at is how do our media help develop a scientific culture, a culture of a scientific approach to whatever we are dealing with in society. So the media have done very well. They do well in generally addressing the topics and the issues. But this underbelly of African society, where superstition is so rife and it's almost every day being reinforced by all manner of quack sources, I don't think the media do very well, nor even our educational systems do very well in addressing this problem of superstition.
Well, just a quick follow-up, Ben. What should be our role, or how should we strategize in terms of trying to ensure that we still become the main authority when it comes to dissemination of information? Because today, some of us, in terms of breaking news, they didn't get it from the traditional media. We woke up, get that information from our WhatsApp groups, and all sort of new media. How do we try and position ourselves in trying to still be relevant in this space so that we don't become an alternative rather than the main factor when it comes to this information?
The question is very critical, and there's no one way around it, especially in an environment of multiplicity, pluralism. And in an environment of multiplicity, we must admit and even encourage variation, varieties of viewpoints and so on and so forth. But in the midst of all of the variety and multiplicity and contrast and so on, there ought always to be a basic, a core value system that all media, whatever political, ideological persuasion you have to focus on, such as the pandemic, such as economic development. You may belong to a school of thought this way or that way, but there ought to be some fundamental things that unite all of us and around which all media agree, even to disagree in moving forward in unison. We're talking about social cohesion and so on. And there are, in the midst of the pandemic, at the same time that we are trying to come out of the pandemic, there are so many other challenges. Take terrorism, for instance, which is a big problem in our sub-region and around most of Africa. No media should take a position that is contrary to helping peace, stability, and so on, no matter what your ideological, political, partisan perspective is. So I think at the end of the day, and I think I heard a hint in Honorable Minister's speech, Kojo Pon's presentation, brilliant presentation now, about public service, public interest, public service journalism, one thing, and also institutionally, public service media. I think in the midst of this, in the midst of commercial media and so on, it is one institutional media form that we must try and work hard to support, build, and help give a better direction to, because that might be the area that would be obliged to perform certain roles that we may not expect, for instance, commercial media to do. Our commercial media, and the biggest ones among them, do very well with public service journalism in this country. For instance, you have private media that are broadcasting live certain things going on in Parliament, certain things going on by the executive and so on and so forth, the judiciary, and it's all fine, but we need to help focus on building, strengthening, and giving support to institutionally public service media in our environment. And I think they stand in a stronger obligatory situation to respond to the important question you are raising.
Let me get to Mr. Boedi as well, as we still stay within more of an expert when it comes to digital marketing. And as you look at post-COVID, how are things going to change for the media? And how should things change for the media? Is there a way out for the media when it comes to marketing communications post-COVID, or we're caught up between the hard rock and deep blue sea?
Thank you very much for inviting me, everyone. And thank you, George, for the question. Can I just say a bit in addition to what Prof said before? I think one of the things Prof said, which is very true, is that mainstream media in particular did very well in communicating and educating and informing us as a public during the COVID, which was good, at the risk sometimes of even losing revenues. I know some stations canceled programs just to broadcast COVID-related. The challenge we had, which Prof hinted at, is where we have, because these days in the digital world, everybody's a publisher, it's easy to put out content readily. So you have people publishing all sorts of, junk content that then kind of disrupted what was going on, and there was so much confusion. You asked about the role of mainstream media in this. I think one of the things we need to do is mainstream media needs to insist on adherence to the ethics of the profession. Now, the trend is that, yes, people are turning to social media to find out news, to discover brands and all of that. But we would always go back to traditional media to validate what we see offline. And we need to project that a bit more. Hope you understand what I mean. So that needs to be strengthened. And then we also need to somehow embrace people, all these bloggers, excuse me to say, who are only after traffic to make money. We need to embrace them and help lift them out of that corner where they are, where their focus is mainly to break news and sensationalize things, because they focused on some prophet somewhere saying that he's going to cure for COVID. COVID is not real. Those were the kind of news that they published, but they got their traffic. So that's the challenge. If I can come back to your question, I think the role of the media, as in what lies ahead for the media, is very positive. Since the outbreak of COVID, we've seen great strides in the penetration of digital, for example. So you've seen more people go online. Honorable Minister mentioned, for example, that 16% of West Africans are online. In fact, in Ghana, are on social media. In fact, in Ghana, it's 28% now. So we are even ahead of a lot of markets here. During COVID, we found people, a lot of content were created and were purposed for online, for example. So the opportunities are widely there. They've always been there. But because of the higher penetration now, we now have more opportunities to make more impact. If it comes to revenue, there are even new ad forms that have developed now. And we as a media need to stop looking, for example, at just ad spaces, selling ad spaces, but talking to the data, talking to what's going on in digital and using that to target people, because businesses are looking for new opportunities to tell their story, to market their products. And media as a channel needs to grow, follow this development, the growth of AI, automation, artificial intelligence, all those things, need to follow that in developing new channels for businesses to grow and tell their story and market their product.
So, also you talked about people coming back to the traditional media for verifying information.
Yes.
In an era where it's all about the trending, and for the likes of maybe, let's say, Stanbic will want to look at what people are talking about, how they feed into that space. How do we address that problem where businesses will want to look at what is the most topical issues that people are talking about,
and they want to run off the back of that.
Play in that.
Yeah, I think this is why a platform like this is very, very important. We need to do more thought leadership, where we begin to educate even the businesses that are chasing the numbers. That's not always about the numbers. Sometimes the facts have to come before the breaking news. That is very, very important. And those who will survive, the businesses that will survive and win, as in the media, will be the ones that stick to the facts. Because the fake news and those who chase just the numbers will always be found out. If I can give an example, one of your colleagues invited me to speak the day that we had Oswald, that breaking news. It was great. We saw a lot of brands tagging along. But what were condom companies and other things doing there? You understand what I mean? It has no relevance at all, but they're just chasing the numbers. I often ask the question, what next after trending? And in my business, what I do, sometimes you have to put the money aside and educate brands that this is the right way to do things. I may not be making money today, and you may not see the spike in numbers that you want, but tomorrow you'll be the winner, because you need to establish yourself as a thought leader, as a leader in that market, and then everything else will follow. I hope that makes sense.
I'll come back to Mr. Bwede. Let me get back to Mr. Bwede, who might be seeing us. Maybe and to look at how we should go about things. Where in the corporate world, they'll talk about it's all about the bottom line. How do we draw the line between the bottom line in the media space and also responsible media and all those things? Should the same principle be applied to the media, even post-COVID, about it being about the bottom line?
I'd like to thank the Honorable Minister, my friend Atwaful, and the Stanbic MD for the opportunity to speak here. I'd like to see the glass as half full. Actually, from where I'm sitting, COVID is a fantastic opportunity in the sense of resetting the media agenda in Africa, and I'll explain why. Between 1960 right through to the 80s, our media infrastructure was driven by military rule in the main and one-party states. And then in 1996, due to the PRSP by the World Bank, we began the process of liberalizing the media environment. Very quickly, come 2021, a few good years later, the fundamental thing which will make media and entertainment successful within the context of the analog regime is advertising revenues. All throughout this period, Africa has had a heavily discounted advertising regime, primarily due to the absence of diaries at a very basic level, but audience research. In comparison, for example, the British Advertising Audience Research Board. So what COVID has done is it's made everybody aware of the reality of a new digital ecosystem. Within the context of business, I'd like to quote or refer to PwC, who continually, since I think 2015, have been producing their Media Entertainment Outlook report. And I'd like to refer to their 2024 report, which is global. So globally, this report says that in 2020, the entertainment and media industry absorbed the historic shock of COVID-19, which toppled long-standing business models, amplified existing trends, and forged new opportunities. As the global economy shrinks for the first time since 2009, the 2.1 trillion industry is forecast to contract in 2020 by 5.6%. From the point of view of Africa, last year, the global cake was 600 billion, i.e. advertising. Africa's take of that cake was 1%. That 1% had about 50% in South Africa, and then in Egypt, and then in Nigeria. Not Nigeria, actually Kenya, right? And then Nigeria. When you look at demographics, you've got Nigeria as our biggest population, and then Ethiopia as our second largest. There's no advertising in Ethiopia. So from the point of view of the industry, 2021 is like 1921 for me, right, in terms of evolution and development. The second point I'd like to raise is that we need to revisit this concept of the half-glass syndrome from a structural capital perspective, from a political capital perspective, from a relational capital perspective, and a financial capital perspective. Political capital. When you look at Reporters Without Borders reports, reporting over the past, I think, 5 years, Ghana has consistently been number one. Currently, I think Ghana is number 3 in comparison to Namibia and Cape Verde. Those two countries have a population of about 2.5 million. We have 30 million, which means that Ghana technically is number 1. Based on, I think, the repeal in July 2001 of the criminal libel law, the media exploded, right? I say this very carefully. In every media environment where advertising is suppressed, you will get brown bag journalism. It's a fact, right? And what that means is that journalists do not have money to do their job effectively in terms of the fourth estate, in terms of the critical issue around investigative authentication of the democratic process and solutions-based journalism, which affects development in our kind of environment in Africa. So from the point of view of Africa, I know the continent quite well. Ghana is well placed to become the digital hub of the continent. In that regard, there are a number of challenges which apply across Africa, but specifically, maybe the Ghana scenario. I don't know the Ghana scenario typically very well, but I do know enough to make some assumptions. One, there are falling advertising revenues. That you've alluded to, Ato. But it's a moot point because everyone who works in advertising will tell you that it's a buyer's market, not a seller's market, right? There's very little effort on the part of those who own media to give the advertiser what they want. So most of the money goes to billboards. And then the telcos came along, and they've got programmatics, they've got algorithms, they've got the tools which pinpoint lifestyle, is it LSMs, right? Which advertisers want. So fundamentally, the industry is moved on. So print is dead. Analog broadcasting is dead. Everything that's happening is like our railway industries after colonization. It's like an airline industry. It's only a matter of time. But we have the opportunity to reset. And when that reset happens, the issue of sustainability, which is many people in support media call existentialist crisis, yeah? The global north, all those in that kind of support services. Like, I think typically there's the Media Foundation for West Africa, which does a lot of work with the American group SIMA and others. Let me not go into that detail. But a reality that has been made worse is that the global north is controlling our media. Facebook is the largest publisher of media right now. So when it comes to any type of news, in Ghana, Facebook reports that first, and then Twitter follows. And then the traditional print media will follow. And look at the models in the US. New York Times had to change quickly to digital to retain profitability. Most of the media, including Washington Post, had to be absorbed by Amazon. So when you look at what's happening in the global north, what's happening here is very existentialist. It's going to get worse. Prof mentioned disinformation. It's a threat which we've all seen, January 6th. It's not new. What happened in the US should tell us that the thing that happened in Tunisia, right? Yeah, it's fundamentally just the beginning. But I don't think it'll affect Ghana because we do, with all our problems, have the best media environment and the best democracy of the continent. So we have an opportunity to lead the continent. I won't go into the big detail of governance and all of that, but one point which I'd like to make is that new internet societies are forming. Those are controlled by FANG being Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. In the West, the global north. In Asia Pacific, it's Alibaba, WeChat, and Jio, Reliance Group from India. Yet, fundamentally, our ecosystem in Africa, according to Google and IFC, will be $180 billion by 2025, and in 2050, 712 billion. We have a huge opportunity to reset, make the digital economy a very powerful income generator for the nation, and to drive the agenda of the African Conflict Free Trade Agreement. I'll end here.
I'll come to you, Mr. But Mr. Chimes, don't you think that some of these things are just passing and temporary? There was talk about when at the height of COVID, work from home. In US, banks are now giving their employees timelines to get back to the office vaccinated. Disneyland was shut down in US. They are back. People are going because they are vaccinated. This thing about is doom and gloom for some sectors of the economy isn't just a temporary thing that when we get over this, when everyone is vaccinated, had immunity, things will pick up. Today, people are being asked to get back to the office.
The Honorable Minister mentioned the New Deal, Roosevelt's New Deal, yeah? So you've got to look at things from, it depends on how you think, right? I think it's a huge opportunity. The reality is that this is not new. 1919 to 1921, maybe 200 million people died, unfortunately, from the flu, right, alone. I mean, there's no kind of like data to verify that. But these pandemics have happened before. And in our instance, malaria is a greater pandemic than COVID. I mean, let's face it, it's not great, but before this happened, the world didn't care about us, right? And people were dying, according to World Health Statistics, World Health Organization statistics. So the reality is that you can look at the gloom or you can look at the boom. I choose to look at the boom. And the boom is that if we get our act right, this country will be the digital leader of Africa.
But let me come to you quickly, and I'll come to Prof as well. In terms of traditional media, is it dead for us, or there is still an opportunity for us in terms of how we craft the marketing communication and how we support the resurgence and the recovery process as well?
That's something I wanted to come back on. George said that it was dead. I like to think that it's dying, and there's opportunity for it to see a resurgence. And I often say, I think, just to give some hope to my friend Ato and the others, it's how you integrate digital in traditional that's most important. I mean, elsewhere in the States, in UK and other places, we've heard of OPEDs and stuff. Yes, I was talking to somebody. a legend like Prof. Kakari should be writing content to be published or even to be on radio or even in print. That will give people reason to continue to patronize print and radio. It's the value you give people in the traditional. If we refuse to grow and we don't adapt how we treat traditional, that would happen to us. The same way in your business. I was saying it this morning. Nobody ever goes back to, whatever you even go back to watch this event from the first second to the end of it. You need to do what we call slice and dice. So you package it for the online audience. If you don't think that way, and you think that people will just come to, it won't work. So traditional media needs to think of how they embrace digital. What happened at New York Times, it's embracing digital so that now there's more value being offered to consumers. And that doesn't kill traditional. I think that's something you hear around. People are scared to embrace digital because they think it will kill traditional media. No, it won't.
Tell us more. Why it wouldn't?
It wouldn't, because it depends on how much content they're giving people value. I'll give an example. I know in this market, some businesses, media houses, have tried to even adopt a subscription model and push it out. I say we are not ready yet because we haven't educated the market enough about how it works. And number two, we haven't given people enough content, enough reason to embrace that. Our tools company tried using QR codes, for example, to give people more content. The reason why it failed is that we were not educated, as in the public wasn't educated on how this works. News breaks in the morning, it's in print. Within 30 minutes or even 5 seconds, the news is developing. You embrace QR codes and other tools to be able to give people the updates. You understand what I'm saying? In the same way, in your station, you have the main broadcast news bulletins, the morning, 6 o'clock, 12, and maybe news night. People like to access content on demand. So if you think about them, that content that they won't be able to access when it's in traditional, and you package it for online, then they'll go and access it when they have the time to access it. This is how the two work together. Plus, create content that's exclusive to both platforms. So, yes, traditional print will exist and online will exist, but give people reason to patronize both, so that they know the value they are getting from online and not getting from traditional. I hope that makes sense.
I asked the other speaker earlier on about the bottom line argument and also about responsible media and all that. At the end of the day, we're looking at how can we ensure that we pay the bills, we pay the workers, but also keep up to the responsible media stuff that everybody is looking up to. How do we deal with that challenge?
There are a number of ways. One of them I would have directed at the Honorable Minister since he's here. We need to invest more and enable the private media to even be able to do more because they are partners. Let's face it. GBC alone can't do everything that you expect the media to do. And so you need to invest even in capacity building and things like that. That's a way that you kind of support and enable private media to be doing. Because otherwise, with private media, it comes down to the bottom line. And if you're not making money, you're not there as a charity. Private media doesn't exist as a charity. So unless you give them enough reason to do a lot of the public, service media journalism, which Prof talked about, it won't happen. But we need to support them, support in terms of even giving them the right infrastructure. I know, for example, some of your reporters report from remote. One way is to equip the NCA, for example, to enable them to have even better connectivity, or even be able to, so that they can be able to broadcast, send news articles from remote and things like that. If you go to stadiums, for example, you want football to be reported and you want to grow the football, why can't the government set up a media center so that those who go to the stadium and want to send their reports can work from there? They have better infrastructure and everything to be able to send. That's a way of equipping private sector to be able to do that.
Just a quick follow-up. Kojo, the Minister of Information, spoke about how the media budget is being cut, not only in the public space, but even the private sector as well.
Yes.
And most companies are merging departments. They are cutting down the marketing budget, even the personnel. At a time when there's no free money anywhere, every company wants to ensure that if I spend a peswa, this is the return. The era of developmental journalism, and I'll come back to Prof to help me out, Is it facing one of its biggest threats post-COVID? Because when I, as an expender, if I advance X amount of money to AAG or the advertising companies and all the rest, I'm going to look at the impact on the bottom line. The era where we were pushing developmental journalism and all the rest, isn't it under threat now?
It is, I mean, face the challenge. But again, what I'll say is that sometimes we, the media, don't sell enough, we don't offer enough value to private sector, which can support some of these. So, for example, this platform is a thought leadership platform. Ultimately, it positions Stanbic and Graphic as leaders when it comes to business conversations in this market. Okay. And we've been doing it for how many years? Is it 11 or 7 years? I had a number sometime this morning. So that's one way. In the same way, some of the, developmental journalism that's being done, it's about communicating the value to private sector where some of the money exists to be able to ride along. It's not always about selling their ads. I do a lot. We need to even rethink CSR in this market so that even thought leadership is part of CSR. It's not always about going to build school buildings elsewhere and all those things, which are the ones that people see easily. No, this is part of it.
Prof, as a champion of ethics and sticking to the professional standards and developmental journalism, post-COVID or in this era of COVID, do you think that those principles and ideals are under big challenge?
There are always challenges to professional standards, ethical behavior, and all the time. Of course, pandemics create their own environment and their own conditions that might offer opportunities for misbehavior, even among all manner of professionals, whether it's doctors, this and that. But let me come back to the theme that we were discussing before you posed this question, concerning the bottom line, media, and their relevance. Again, a lot of time when we talk, we are talking about the bigger elements. We are talking about resurgence, economic recovery, and so on and so forth. And so when we talk about the bottom line, let us relate it to the many radio stations that are in the district capitals, in the rural areas of our country, and through whom I suspect, Mr. Ayeboafu may correct me, many or most of our rural dwellers are listening to. Many of them are catching hell. I do know a number of community radio stations that almost closed down simply for the inability to pay electricity bills. We talk about supporting these media. I'm not a member of government, but we all ought to always appreciate that we have governments in an economy that are very limited. So what can government do? What must government do? Somebody had a brilliant idea of a media development fund or a media something fund. Of course, like so many other things in the public realm, it got bastardized, got abused, and nothing came out of it. But I suspect that even for government to be relieved of every day being bombarded to help media, something like that might need to be established as a way of shoring up the media. In my mind, I'm not talking about handouts. A media loan fund that is very accessible with a very competitive interest rate might be worth it, because the digitalization of media, we just heard about the statistic that in West Africa penetration is 16%. For various reasons, the mass of our people are not going to readily be on the digital platforms for some time to come. We must accept that, and therefore, I like the idea of how do you marry, for want of a better word, the digital development, and then the sustenance of traditional media. So that our rural people, where the economy really is coming from, will also be part of all of the conversations for resurgence, for economic development, and so on and so forth. If we ignore where the majority are in helping to build up the media there, in helping to build the capacity of the media there. For instance, you drive around this country and radio stations in the rural areas are imitating the big stations in Accra, whereby from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., people are doing breakfast show. What is the content of 4 hours of radio program? Whereas, a certain re-engineering might make those radio stations more usable, more profitable for the audiences there. In other words, the bottom line we are talking about with media, what can we do to support the larger media terrain outside of Accra, Twumasi, and so on, where the rural people are also listening to? Somebody said GBC cannot do it alone. Certainly, GBC cannot and must not be asked to do it alone in a new environment of multiplicity and pluralism, which means all the different sectors need to be supported. Even the larger private media who are now doing television, they have severe difficulties of sustaining their economies. How do we address all of this? How do we also address the movement onto the digital platforms? How do we help bloggers or blogging so that they will be more relevant and may minimize the tendency to producing fake news and so on? These are all serious questions that ought to be part of the ongoing conversation. At the end of the day, the advertising community, they also thrive on an economy that is thriving. If the economy is slow, advertisers, yes, they may withdraw here and there and so on, but we do know that advertising depends on industry that is growing. In an economy like this, yes, they may revert to billboards and all of that, but at the end of the day, we must, that's why the discussion about a resurgence is so important for everybody, because the advertisers can go down if the economy basically is not thriving very well. Advertising depends on consumers. And again, the banking sector and financial banking education. What can we demand the banks to do? Stanbic, Malco, and the CEO here, and you all. What can you help the media to do in terms of educating the public on financial and banking sense, a better sense? So that, for instance, we can't kill it all, but there will be a minimal attraction to the pyrams and all of these schemes that have brought untold hardships to individuals and families. So what initiative can Stanbic and Graphic, for instance, take? You see, because people make wrong investments. Because they lack a certain kind of education, but of course also because we all want money and we want it now. So in these conversations, there seems to be some global obligation on everybody and every sector, and the media becomes the pivot, the center, the core of perhaps helping all of these sectors to do what we might all benefit from. So again, I'm thinking aloud. I don't have any real answers to these complex questions.
Prof, it's great to think a lot. That's why we had the information minister. You also had the Stanbic Bank MD here. It says that when when you talk to God, you talk to the air, right? There are gods in the space that you're talking about. This is the graphic business Stanbic breakfast meeting as you look at marketing communication, post-COVID, the role of the media in terms of socio-economic resurgence. And we'll be bringing in the audience to join us in this discussion. This program is live on Joy 99.7 FM, the Joy News channel on Multi-TV, and also DTV as well. And I'll be bringing the audience soon in terms of contributions, questions. I've seen advertisers here, I've seen content developers here, I've seen media owners here as well. What do they have to say when it comes to the new media quotes as in post-COVID? Or some are saying that COVID will still be with us. It's not going anywhere. How should we strategize to survive in this market? Mr. Buedi, there's the bit about the marketing communication bit that one would ask that what should change to survive the market? What should change to compel the likes of Stanbic to put aside a large chunk of their monies to communicate to the public? And also, what should change from those who act as the medium to convince the public that, yes, I have to listen to this communication coming out?
We need to embrace more of the new formats, for example. So these days, you've heard of programmatic and other words that are bandied around. Even location-based marketing, for example. It might be old, but it's still very relevant in these days. And also some of the old tools. Prof mentioned something about financial education. And let me say this, maybe it's as a tip for Stanbic. In this market, when we mention bloggers, what comes to mind is entertainment and people just snitching on, others. But blogging is an area where industry hasn't really explored, okay? If you ask me why Stanbic is my bank, you ask me why I'll go to the website or go to the app. Is it to check my balance or to check the basic stuff? But there's no place where people go for financial education. For example, somebody has finished school, they want to buy a car the next year. Where do they go for tips on planning to buy a car and things like that? We need a home elsewhere in other markets. There are blogs that drive such education. And this is an area that they can do so that they can partner with you, for example, as a radio station, where this content that's created and sitting on the blog is then distributed. Again, this is a lot being said here, great content, but how do we package the content for post-event access and consumption? Because we know a lot of people access content on demand. This is content that would fit your YouTube channel, for example. So you have your own TV station where these are done, and you drive traffic to it. So these are various ways that you can do them. So also, one of the things is that today, there's a lot of data available. So you should make data-driven decisions about every dollar that you spend in your marketing. Okay. In the olden days, like George said, when you get your MNC, when I was working in corporate, you get your MNC, you know how many billboards you want to put out. You know how many TVs, you want to shoot a TVC or whatever. Great. My friend will tell you we did a lot in that industry. But the reality is that these days you need to start talking more about the numbers, the data, the analytics and things like that, to be able to go back to your board to defend the marketing budget that you are setting up. And if you're not doing that, you won't be able to progress. There are three words I often mention: monitor, measure, and optimize performance. Monitor, measure, and optimize performance. Today, you can even monitor and measure performance in real time. When I used to work in corporate, I send out an email. Within 5 minutes, I can tell who has received the email, how many have bounced. This is many years ago when I used to work in another market. So that with that data, I was able to tell who I need to retarget. Things like that. You need to start talking to your data. The analytics is there. Data abounds. We just need to access the right data. And those of us who are in the industry, when we have our clients, we need to tell them, show the data to them, see how things are working. That's the way to get more budget to support what you want to do.
It'll be a good time to turn to the audience who also participate in this discussion. I will first start with the chairman of the National Media Commission, a quick comment, and then also some other distinguished guests that I've seen here. Then I also give the audience the opportunity to ask questions. If I look at my time, I'm left with 15 minutes more, and I want to capture all these questions and contributions as it's live on all the various media platforms. So if you're as brief as possible, I'll be so grateful for that. So if you can get the chairman of NMC the microphone to look at what he has to say, just a quick comment, and then I'll take other comments as well, and I'll open it up for quick questions as well. Back to the guys on the stage here, and I get back to the audience, please. So can someone get Mr. Yabuda Yabua for a microphone for me, for him to... Okay. So then he will make a quick comment. So let Mr. Chairman see as well. For you, do you think that... I get your submission, and I, as someone who is in this space, I'm worried. Is there future for traditional media?
I'd like you to think about it this way, right? So you're a company, take yourself like you're a corporate entity, and you decide to move into a new property, right? Because your business is expanding, but you're going to keep your old property until you've built the new one. So traditional media has to move into convergence. It's a powerful tool if it's within the context of a converged environment. But the future is digital. And analog is dead. It's as simple as that.
Let me get to the chairman of the National Media Commission in playing their regulatory role. And having all these challenges been brought about, sitting at the top there, you see that the space is quite difficult or challenging?
Well, whatever it is, we need to face it. This is the reality of our time. And there's nothing that people do that is not challenging. If you limit yourself only to the challenges, then you may not make progress. Because the more obstacles that you are able to cross, the greater depth that you make in terms of moving forward. Yeah, but Prof specifically made reference, and I think that I agree with Prof that in giving support, we must target it at maximizing the returns on the support that you give. It is not every support that you give that may yield the required results. And the greatest investment is about capacity building. Because a lot of the people who commit those errors that we speak about, sometimes they are not conscious of the fact that they are misleading people. Because they think that they are performing a responsibility, but for lack of appreciating what they are doing and the value that they have to generate by themselves, they commit themselves into some of the things. And so I will support any support that may come, whether from government or from corporate world, that is aimed at building the capacity of the human resources that are available in the media to achieve their work. Now, the other thing, you were asking a question about whether development communication will wash in the face of what we are doing. Most of the time, the problem is the packaging. Because if you are able to package it well and make it more interesting, because sometimes people are not just interested in things that will exercise them, they are equally interested in the things that will impact on their lives. And one of the things that we must stand up, and that is the problem, question about ethics and all that, is how valid or how true or how verifiable are some of the statements that people are putting across. And that is also why I agree with Mr. Abwedi that sometimes the kind of people that we bring to speak in itself is an attraction or distraction. Now, one of our biggest difficulties is the polarization of our environment. Where when you are speaking about an issue, people are not interested in what you are presenting, but the colors that you are wearing. And that is what will make people look at it. I live in Tamale for some years, and there was this problem within the Muslim community there, between the Federal group and the traditional descent. And therefore, when people go to any event, they look at who is sitting at the head of the table. If they see that it's an Federal person who is leading, the other ones will go back. They are not willing to listen. If they come and they don't see, so then what you have to do is to make sure that when you want the people to come, put Afajura there and put the Orthodox also there. So when they come, they see that both of them are adequately represented, and therefore that they are willing. Because until people are willing to listen to you, they cannot garner anything out of you. And the first thing in moving forward is to attract people to devote the time even to listen. Because it is only after they have listened that they can determine whether it is worthwhile or it is not worthwhile. It tells us that the mode of communicating and the way that we package information might be such that it will appeal to the senses of people rather than to their emotions. That is one of the ways that we can move forward.
Thank you so much, the Chairman of the National Media Commission. If we can have about 3 questions or 4, and I hope we can scatter it across all the various interest groups here. So if you raise up your hands, I would call you to make a quick commentary or a very quick question and have our guest here answer them. I can see a lady's hand behind there. If you first introduce yourself and where you're coming from, I'll be grateful, please.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Venus Tawia. I'm director of Now Available Africa. It's a leading digital advertising agency in Ghana. I feel compelled almost to lend my voice to the conversation since there are no women present on the panel and I'm a lady in that space. I think sometimes it takes a catalyst to push people into a space, and I'm really happy to see that we're having a forum whereby you're using language that we've been championing for the past 8 years. Stephen can attest to that. And I'm happy to see that Ghana in particular embracing the opportunities that digital and tech offer us and are looking at how we can optimize that to improve and create solutions for ourselves. I strongly believe that in creating the change and behavioral change that we seek to see in our environment, it will take commitment. Behavior change doesn't happen overnight. And it really requires a strong partnerships between the media and us agencies. We're facilitators for you. I also ask that those who are championing and calling for change in our environments commit to really good budgets, because it requires a sustained effort over a long period of time to sensitize people, to let people hear, and to create behavior change that we want to see in our environment. I do have a question for the panel. As you can see, in this environment, we have optimized the presence of digital. People can log on to various social media platforms to engage in the conversation that we're having in a physical space. It poses a challenge to media houses because content now is instant. People have watched it and they no longer have to sit at home and wait till 8 o'clock to view the news. So my question to you would be, as media owners, what do you advise them to do? If you're a business and now your model has been changed so much, what systems can you have in place to allow you to optimize in your business? Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam. If I can have 3 more questions and even this contribution, be as brief as possible so we can take more. I see a gentleman over there, his hand is up. Can you give us your name, where you're coming from, and go to your question?
All right, good morning. My name is Kwesi Eisen from Pacific Solutions and representing Advertising Association of Ghana. Mine is just a contribution, and I would like to add my voice to the aspect of data and analytics that was presented earlier, or you spoke to that very well. Yes, I think one of the problems that we haven't seriously addressed is the issue of analytics, both digital world and then in the traditional world. And that is an area that I would love us all as thought leadership platforms providers, we should tackle them seriously. Because over here, we even had 16% online penetration in West Africa. We also had 28% online penetration. But that is the descriptive aspect of it. Now, we haven't even looked at the diagnostic as to why it is so, and then build on to the prescriptions in terms of actions that we can take to address them, and then make predictions into the future how it's going to happen. That's the traditional world. And when it comes to analytics, these things matter very much. When it comes to the digital world, web analytics, for instance, is very, very common. A lot of us use websites, but we don't really derive maximum benefit from it in terms of the analytics. We don't even know where our audiences are coming from. We don't even know how we acquire them. We don't know how they behave when they come onto our sites. And then the conversion aspect of it, if in terms of sales or downloads or sign-ups are your objectives. So these are the areas I think moving forward we should be seriously be looking at. Thank you very much.
Any other, Bright, any question? Not just distinguished guest here, but we also have the information minister here. We have the chairman of the National Media Commission here as well. Bright, any quick question?
Thank you, George, for the opportunity again. For a question, I would want us to ask ourselves, what will it take for the resurgence to happen from various perspectives? The ecosystem has been built over the last 50 years or so, from the mainframe computers through to the mobile phone now. A lot has been done. Data has been collected. The ecosystem has been organized. 20 years ago, if you went into London, you could do navigation around. 10 years, even more. In Ghana, today you can do navigation. You can find any place. So the structural changes have been done. Now, the next thing is how do we make sure that we prepare ourselves to take advantage of the structural reorganization that has been put in place for Africa to leapfrog? Those are my questions that I keep asking myself.
Mr. Budi, I thought there was one question from the lady, and I just want you to pick that question quickly about content going forward. I stand to be helped here.
Venus, can you repeat that, the question that you asked? Sorry. I can hear you, yeah.
No, please.
So the question is, now that we're in an environment where the media themselves are optimizing on digital, so for example, there's no longer the requirement for someone to wait till 8 o'clock in the evening to watch this program or to watch news, right? Where news can be accessed on demand. How does a media owner create an entity or leverage and sustain their business in this environment?
Right, yeah, I get that now. I think some media houses are doing that now. You go to some media houses now, there's a separate online editorial team that creates content, not off the back of what's going into traditional, but creating content on the go, things like that. We need to start looking at that because that's the reality. Okay, so the kind of regular operation is that online only publishes what is being put out on traditional. No, that's wrong. You need to have an arrangement where the online creates its own content in addition to complementing what's been created offline, because it's always on. And Venus and I have worked in this environment for many years. Digital is always on. The news is breaking and all of that. I'll give an example. What happened at the DRA? A lot of the content that your station used was filmed by some independent person standing in one corner and filming it. And the news was just always good. You couldn't delay the broadcast until 12 o'clock or 5:30 for Elvis to come on, Evans to come on. And so the online team need to be pushing out that content regularly. It's a challenge, but we need to invest not only in infrastructure, also in capacity, and dovetail into what Bright asked. We need to have more conversations like this, where there's thought leadership, where a lot more people get equipped with the knowledge and understanding. And we need to invest also even in libraries in our media houses, where people will go to read white papers and things like that, because digital it's always on. Things are changing every day. You can't, same old. I mean, Honorable Kuju said, same old won't work in the post-COVID era.
I see. Let me go to Mr. Afomoni. Quick comment from him. President, how could I have forgotten our President Afomoni for just a quick comment whilst we try and draw the curtain down this program. Quick one.
Let me quickly sprinkle a stardust of commendation on graphic for this program and the aptness of the topic, which chimes with the World Bank report. And this report supports the correlation between well-researched, well-presented business and economic news and a country's economic upswing. So this reinforces the need for the Ghanaian media, the need for all key players to make a conscious effort to move the paradigm from the obsessive and compulsive politics which has enveloped this country to specialization, especially on business and financial journalism, since it holds the key to picking us up from this pickle caused by COVID-19. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Afamoni, for that very brief comment as you draw the curtain down. Let me go first to Mr. Twumasi as we wrap up. Your final thoughts as in the future.